If you've ever forgiven someone way too fast, ignored your pain, or said one too many times too often, it's all a part of God's plan. You might be spiritually bypassing. I am guilty of having done this, and I spoke about it in vlog number 24. We are going to unfold what spiritual bypassing means and where it came from, and how you can rectify it on your spiritual journey if you're guilty of this too. Hi, my name is Michelle Fondin. I'm the author of 12 published books, including Heal Yourself, A Return to Wholeness, the integration of body, mind, soul, and spirit, and The 8 Limbs of Yoga for Modern Times, a practical guide to the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. You can find all of my 12 published books on Amazon and 10 of them on Ingram Spark. If you're new to my channel, I want to welcome you here. Thank you so much for subscribing so you never miss a video. Give the video a thumbs up, engage with the video via comments below, say something, engage with others as well. I welcome this warm, inviting community to really pull together and get to the core of your spiritual self, your spiritual awakening, and integration of mind, body, soul, and spirit. I'm excited to talk about this topic on spiritual bypassing. It's a crazy one. We're really gonna get to the bottom of how not to do this on your spiritual journey, or if you awakened early like me, how to correct those patterns that you may have had throughout your entire life. And I'll explain the why too, because you might be wondering, like, why is this even important? We're gonna go through that as well. First of all, I think it's really important to understand the origins of this term spiritual bypassing, which was very foreign to me until about the year 2020 to 2021. Around that time frame. John Welwood was an American clinical psychologist. He lived from 1943 to 2019. Now, he is one of the main leaders responsible for something called transpersonal psychology, which integrates the Western clinical psychological model with Eastern philosophy or Eastern spirituality. He was a Zen Buddhist master and teacher, and he also founded the East-West Psychology program at the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco, and wrote several books in which he coined this term, spiritual bypassing, around the mid-80s, and integrated it into his psychology practice. Now, being a Zen Buddhist master, John Welwood saw his Buddhist friends and other spiritual teachers in the Zen Buddhist community. He saw them bypassing their emotions and using spirituality to cover up those more negative emotions. Now, there's a couple ways in which people can do this. So what he noticed was that instead of facing their grief, anger, trauma, etc., right? All of those darker and more negative feelings, they would jump to like, everything is perfect, right? The present moment is as it is, which is a great way to think, by the way, but not erasing your own feelings. It's all karma. It's all an illusion. This is something I hear in Vedic tradition too, East Indian Vedic tradition, which is like, it's all Maya, it's all an illusion. And so they would bypass their human feelings, their real human feelings, for spirituality. And that is what spiritual bypassing really is. So his work was all about integrating the psychological shadow and the spiritual practice so that you could become more holistic in nature, so that you could become more whole in yourself and you're not abandoning part of yourself, something that I did for decades and didn't even know I was doing it. Because when you abandon your negative feelings like anger, frustration, you're really depressed sometimes, or you have resentments towards others. If you suppress and repress and ignore those aspects of yourself, they're just going to get bigger, 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 and bigger. And covering it up with spirituality or spiritual words creates something what we refer to in spiritual circles as spiritual ego. But it can create something much darker than that, where you see people who are meditating every day, but still they're pretty rotten people when it comes to it, right? Another aspect of spiritual bypassing would be making fun of others for having real human emotions, or downplaying others if they're sad or depressed or stressed or frustrated, right? And it would sort of be using spiritual superiority to downplay others' emotions. And like I said, sometimes I've seen it happen where people even make fun of other people, saying, well, you're not spiritual because you are depressed, or you are sad, or you are anxious, or you're not trusting in higher power or God, and that's your problem. Spiritual bypassing can come covered up in covering your own emotions or trying to throw a blanket over someone else's emotions as well. Before we go into the common signs and patterns of spiritual bypassing, I would like to outline that myself and also the author of Spiritual Bypassing, John Welwood, he did say in his works that spiritual bypassing is not 100% evil, or it's not bad 100%. It's a coping mechanism, right? It's a coping mechanism for those who have no idea what to do with their more negative emotions. And certainly this was the case for me as well. And also, I mentioned in my vlog number 24, if you have not yet viewed it, I'm going to post that link right here. But one thing I did mention was that in a way, it's a good thing, because we really need more people who are looking at the bigger spiritual picture rather than getting deep and dark into the negativity, which people can often do. And it's not that you shouldn't notice the more negative emotions, because that's really what we're talking about here, is to notice them and work through those darker emotions, the bigger situations in your life, which create chaos and havoc. But it's more about staying in the negative emotions that isn't great, right? Because then you're not seeing the bigger picture. When you stay in there, get entrenched, you attract other people who are going to help you stay there, because like attracts like. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about seeing the emotion, addressing it, working through it, and then moving on. But seeing the bigger picture is often very, very helpful, and it can help lift people out of despair, right? So it's not that spiritual bypassing is all bad, but it is when you're ignoring your other emotions. So let's go ahead and take a look at the symptoms, the signs, the symptoms, the patterns of spiritual bypassing, and how you can recognize this in yourself. Because like me, who stayed blind to this concept, I'd never even heard of the concept. I stayed blind to this concept until 2020. Maybe you too don't even know you're doing this, because maybe you were born awakened, or you had a spiritual awakening very early in your life, or maybe you grew up in spiritual communities, because a lot of times, just like John Welwood saw with his Zen Buddhist community, in a lot of spiritual communities, there are many people that are spiritually bypassing. And like I said, oftentimes they have this spiritual ego about them, and they're really like kind of nasty people when it comes down to it, because they haven't worked through their shadow. And so they're covering up their shadow with spirituality, and that never works. It makes you look fake, really, and a lot less authentic. The number one sign, and they're not in any specific order, I just have them here. So the number one sign of spiritual bypassing is premature forgiveness. I am 100% guilty of this throughout my entire life, okay? Premature forgiveness is basically not seeing what someone did for the action and processing the emotions that come with it, right? Like processing, how did this affect me? How do I feel about this? How can I move through this and support myself in this process, right? So looking at your emotions, looking at how you reacted if someone did you wrong or wronged you, and seeing how you feel about it, noticing the emotion, feeling the emotion, integrating it into your body, mind, and saying, how can I self-soothe myself back into feeling better, right? So that's the healthier process. Premature forgiveness is like, well, they don't really know what they're doing. They didn't know what they were doing at the time. They're only human and humans make mistakes. Only God is perfect. Humans aren't perfect. I need to forgive them because that is being the bigger person. That is really what we need to do as spiritual people. Or you could insert your religion here, right? I've heard it like, that's what we do as Christians, And then what happens is you're really masking over how you felt when such and such thing happened. So forgiveness is good. Yes, it's necessary to forgive not only others, but yourself. But it's really important also to move through the emotional processing that happens when something bad happens and you're needing to process it. Number 2 is love and light mentality. Love and light. And what this really is like faking a positive attitude. That's what I'm going to call it. Faking a positive attitude. I know people that do this, and I can often see right through them. So faking a positive attitude is really like covering up anger, grief, sadness, frustration, depression with fake positivity, right? It's like love and light, like everything is perfect. And it really doesn't do you or the other person justice as far as authenticity of relationship goes. Now, I was dating someone way back, which I talk about this relationship a lot, so I'm not going to go into it, but he always had a positive attitude. Now, I always have a positive attitude, but if I'm upset, the people around me typically know, right? They typically know. The people that are closest to me, like my family and closest friends, I pretty much wear my emotions on my sleeve so they can sense something. They know. So it's not like I'm putting on a positive demeanor or a fake smile. If I'm happy, I'm happy. And 98% of the time, I'm happy. But if I'm worried or stressed, people can usually read right through me. But this person in particular would always say, like, everything is great, life is perfect, all the time, 100% of the time. And I knew for a darned fact that in this person's life, this person was not fine and not perfect and not great. And so that is what I'm talking about, putting on the fake positivity and the fake smile, even if things are like catastrophic, right? Now, that doesn't mean that you cannot have a positive attitude when something in your life is going awry, right? That's seeing the glass as half full versus half empty. And that's a great way to go through life, right? Because you can't control everything or anything, really. So when you have a positive attitude in the way of seeing the glass as half full, that's very different than saying like, oh, everything's just wonderful, love and light, God is in control, trust the universe, and you really don't mean it. You really don't mean it. There's a lot of like anger seething underneath the surface, right? Number 3 would be minimizing or rationalizing harm. and this is dangerous, to be honest with you. This one is really dangerous. I have not seen this so much firsthand from the people closest to me. And I certainly did not do this, with the exception, like I said, we've talked a lot about codependent relationships, but my life was never in danger in any of those relationships. But indeed, if people use spirituality to cover up harm, that is super dangerous, but it is a way of spiritual bypassing. So for example, saying like everything happens for a reason, it's all part of karma. Like if something really bad happens, right? If someone's like abusive, physically abusive, for example, or saying like you chose this before you were born, or used in a way that like shuts down how someone is feeling, right? And we're talking about if somebody is in harm's way. If somebody is in a specific relationship that causes them harm, or if something happens to them, like a massive car accident, right? So if you're using a spiritual bypassing, you might say like, it's probably your karma, right? That's a horrible thing to say to someone in that situation, or even yourself, right? So again, it takes away from authenticity. It takes away from the real feeling. Now, in my own self-reflection, I'll tell you that right now, in my own self-reflection, so I'm not saying when it's projected out toward others, but in my own self-reflection, if something does happen, let's say I'm walking through the room and I stub my toe really badly, for example, I do go back to where was my mind at when that happened. Was I thinking negative thoughts? Was I worried about something? Had I been worrying about something for days on end, where was my vibration at that time, right? So going back and doing that type of self-reflection is a really good thing. And that's not saying like, oh, it was my karma that I stubbed my toe. It was more like, oh, well, let me just look to see where my mind happened to be at. Minutes before, hours before, days before, but minimizing someone's harmful situation through spirituality is not a great thing. I think you might agree to that one. Number 4 is detachment masquerading as enlightenment. And it says confusing emotional numbness with equanimity. Oh, I know people in spiritual communities. I have experienced this. And this is, I think, really equated to spiritual ego, where someone says, human emotions are not important. I'm on the spiritual path, right? So I don't bother myself with those baser human emotions. Let me give you a little old example here. I dated someone in high school / college who was on a spiritual journey, who taught me a lot about spirituality. And I write about this person in my book, The 8 Limbs of Yoga for Modern Times, because this person was a person that introduced me to yoga and meditation and Zen Buddhism. But after we broke up, or around the time we broke up, he took a completely different path, a very different path, and started becoming a Seventh-day Adventist. They are very, very strict religiously. And I would say they consistently spiritually bypass. In their religion, there is everything that is black or white. Everything is black or white. You're either a God-following person, a spiritual person, or you are not. There is no in between. And so this person, having been on this specific spiritual path for decades, has a very distorted view of sexuality. Now, this person's not married or wasn't married when I spoke to them. This is years later after we had broken up, and I was on the yogic path and he was still on the Seventh-day Adventist path. And so he had this very suppressed or distorted view of sexuality. Now, the problem with that is that anything that's suppressed or repressed gets completely distorted. And so his mindset was, it is a sin to have sex before marriage, and it is a sin in his religion to have sex or be married to someone who is not in that specific religion. And so the problem is that he is a person, right? He is a man, a person. And so what ended up happening was he was having an affair with a woman from the church who was also unmarried or widowed or divorced or something. They were very guilty about it. Like, they were feeling guilty, but they were still having the affair. The problem with that is, like, he tried to pretend that he did not have any human desires, because to him, human desires were sinful. And so instead, he used his spirituality to try to bypass the real human emotions and needs and desires of the human body. And so that is a prime example of trying to use detachment, like, oh, I have no attachment to human desires, I'm a spiritual being. But that totally blows up in someone's face. Number 5 is anger-phobia, meaning the fear of anger. Anger is unspiritual. Therefore, we shall not be angry. In a book that John Welwood wrote, which is really a more anthology of other writers who speak about Zen Buddhism, in one of the chapters, and I'm not sure which author quoted this, but one of the chapters, they were talking about being with your emotions as part of Zen Buddhism. And one phrase that stuck out to me so much was that if you sit with your anger, it is not bad. A person who is angry and sits with their anger will never cause harm to others. It is the person that sits in anger but smiles and pretends that they are not angry who is bound to harm others. That was deeply profound to me. So sit with the anger with awareness, and it will naturally dissipate. Number 6, no boundaries. Having no boundaries. This was also problematic for me for many decades. Meaning, you would over-tolerate someone's behavior, might be too compassionate towards someone, have no boundaries, you overgive, people-pleasing. So that very much is spiritual bypassing too, because it's saying, like, they can get better. God loves them. I love them. Everyone should love them. Meanwhile, the person is performing all kinds of very bad acts, right? Doing very bad things. And I already mentioned feeling spiritually superior to others and using spirituality as a means to feel superior to others. What is the harm, or what is the cost of spiritual bypassing? One is that you can't love yourself fully if you're spiritually bypassing, because you're not addressing the whole of who you are, right? You're not accepting that, hey, I'm human. I can have positive feelings and negative feelings, and that is okay. For example, I can sit with my anger, and that is okay. It's okay to have negative thoughts. It's okay to have angry thoughts or anxious thoughts or depressed thoughts. That doesn't make me a bad person. It prevents emotional integration, so you have split energy. Remember what I was saying about the people that are just saying, like, love and light, but meanwhile you can tell that they're really seething underneath the surface, that they're not being genuine or authentic. That is lack of emotional integration. That is split energy. It does interrupt your nervous system from healing, because again, you're saying something or doing something, and underneath the surface, you are being something else. And it can lead you to repeat painful relationship patterns. And we spoke a couple weeks ago about emotional unavailability, and I'll post that video right here. But that's one of the things that can happen, is you can be completely emotionally unavailable if you are spiritually bypassing. And finally, it doesn't allow you to become fully spiritually awakened. And here's why. In other videos, we've talked about the fullness of chakra healing as an example, and the necessity to heal the first 3 chakras, which deal with chakras of matter, meaning your human side. And so when you're not healing the human side of you and every aspect of who you are, then you can only go so far in your spiritual awakening. So how can you stop spiritual bypassing? Well, the first one is to identify the emotion, name the emotion, and feel it. Sit with the emotion, no matter how negative it happens to be. You're going to identify it, name it, feel it in your body, and allow it to be what it is for the moment. Allow the discomfort to happen within the body. Notice where pain might be arising somewhere in your body when you're feeling this negative emotion. Validate your humanity, meaning even though you're a human being and a spiritual being, right? Fully human, fully spiritual, acknowledge the humanness of yourself. Because a lot of times when someone gets on the spiritual path, they try to deny that they are human, they forget they're human, or they think it's somehow bad to acknowledge their humanness. And it's never bad to acknowledge your humanness because you decided to come here as a human being, right? Your soul decided. So it can't be a bad thing at all, right? When you use meditation to get to the core of your authentic truth and the core of your authentic self. Try as hard as you can not to use meditation and other spiritual practices for escape. So many people on the spiritual path use meditation as a means of escape or other spiritual practices as a means to disconnect from the world, but in a bad way, right? That's the spiritual bypassing way, right? Not an authentic way. Authentically speaking, you want to step into more of who you are through meditation and spiritual practices and not less of who you are. True spirituality includes your entire self. As I write about in my book, Heal Yourself, A Return to Wholeness, the integration of body, mind, soul, and spirit. This includes the light and the shadow. It includes all the parts of you to be integrated as one. And that is when true spiritual awakening can emerge. I hope this was helpful in decoding what spiritual bypassing actually is. I know it was a little lengthy, but I felt like I couldn't leave out certain examples for you to fully grasp this. Before you go, come closer to your device. Just come on in a little bit. I want you to know that you matter. You are a work in progress. You are never a finished product. You are not expected to be perfect. You are perfect already as you are. You are whole as you are. You are loved and you deserve a beautiful life. And the world is a much, much better place because you are in it. I want to thank you so much for joining me here today. Please stay tuned on Sunday for 5 guided questions to reflect, ponder, and journal on this topic. Thank you so much for being a part of my community here on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe if you're not yet subscribed. Click on the bell, scroll up to all for all notifications. Thank you for giving the video a thumbs up. Share this video with others who are on a spiritual journey. Thank you so much for your support of my work. You can purchase 1 or more of my 12 published books. Check out my website. I teach meditation and other courses, and I have other resources for you on my website, michellefondinauthor.com, and I will see you in the next video.